Please join me in welcoming the Mayor of Chattanooga, Tim Kelly, and Susan Crawford, the John A. Riley Clinical Professor of Law at Harvard Law School, for an exciting conversation about local innovation.
Everybody, how you doing? I couldn't be happier than to be here. My name is Susan Crawford. I teach at Harvard Law School. I'm a big fan of Chattanooga, and we have with us here today Mayor Tim Kelly, who has been mayor since 2021. He is a native Chattanoogan. I'm here to tell you that you have to go to Chattanooga. Not only does it have the fastest internet access in the country and cheapest, but it's a beautiful city with a wonderful airport, a tremendous workforce, and enormous energy. But Mayor Kelly, glad you're here. Talk to us about what fiber optic infrastructure is doing for your city today.
Well, thank you, Susan. And first, a little bit of a history lesson for those of you that may not know. I mean, Chattanooga is, it's a remarkable city with a little bit of a funny name, which is kind of a barrier for us all to get over there. But, back in the probably 20, 25 years ago, Chattanooga really struggled to figure out what our place was, our competitive advantage. Brought in Michael Porter to look at clusters, and we were just kind of grasping at straws, dog paddling in circles. And so the city forefathers then had this idea to really throw what was a Hail Mary in retrospect, and issue the bonds and create the first municipal fiber network in the United States, which is what we have today. And, we're fervent believers in fiber as a utility. In Chattanooga now, you can get 1 gig symmetrical up and down for $67 a month. 2.5 gig residential symmetrical is a thing in Chattanooga, and it has been, and at the time, of course, the private sector came out and said this is going to fail. This is socialism. It's terrible, and they now have EPB, our electric utility, runs it. They have 75% market share. Consistently rated the highest customer satisfaction of any utility in the area, and it's become a huge economic driver for us. Right, it's brought in a lot of remote work, a lot of remote workers, a lot of tech workers, and we're now tipping off into quantum research with our optical fiber, which we can talk about a bit more.
So I hope that your minds are just spinning with the opportunity in America. Most innovation happens in cities, and Chattanooga is a place that is a center of innovation. Let's talk about infrastructure first, and then I want to talk to you about workforce development.
Yep.
So let's start with the infrastructure. That fiber makes possible tsunamis of data spinning around.
Right.
But you're a businessman.
Yes.
That's your background. Talk to us about the kinds of businesses that are showing up in Chattanooga to employ the people there. What's going on in the tech scene?
Well, again, the bigger picture here, of course, is that mid-sized cities, if you're familiar with Steve Case's work, Rise of the Rest, and so on, we're still up against this structural barrier. Most of the VC, most of the research is happening on the coast, in larger cities, and in cities with R1 universities, which we do not have. So we're kind of looking for some creative solutions for a dance partner there. But most of what we've had come in are not large data centers or big tech partners. Most of it is tech entrepreneurs, a lot of logistics. One of the other things that EPB does is we have the highest density of smart switches anywhere in the country. And so we've got a lot of tech startups there now working in incubators and accelerators, looking at energy management, at smarter EV charging, things of that nature.
I hope you're feeling both energized and calm. This interesting feeling. Here's a government official, non-partisan mayor, right? A real leader of a mid-sized city you can picture it between Atlanta and Nashville on the Tennessee-Georgia border. Beautiful Tennessee River rolling by. It's called the Scenic City. So this should all be making you dream, frankly, of visiting and perhaps living there. Talk to us about your workforce, both the issues and the opportunities for workforce in AI in Chattanooga.
So, I've said this before, I'm on a lot of workforce-related committees because my overall plan in Chattanooga coming in, I never ran, I was telling Susan, I never ran for student council before I ran for mayor. I was a business guy, I was a startup guy, did a lot of work in the foundation world, was on a couple of big philanthropic foundations there, and was the chairman of our community foundation, and came to understand that really one of the big issues we had was closing gaps in the community, between the black and white community in Chattanooga, very frankly, and began to think about how we did that, or how we do that. And a lot of it has to do with educational reform. So I served on the steering committee of an organization called Chattanooga 2.0 that really helped is reforming, started 10 years ago, our educational system to focus more on STEM and STEAM, right? And on technical education and meeting the needs of industry, rather than kind of, churning people out in the traditional way, which either go to college or nothing, or you're nothing, right? So we've got a big head start in that regard. And as I say all the time, workforce development is the most important thing that I do. It absolutely is. And him and I, with Bill Within is here. We are one of 5 innovation districts for apprenticeship in the country. And so we're working really hard to get kids into workforce opportunities sooner. We have these, what we call future ready institutes in our schools that pair with local industry to again expose kids. I did my MBA late in life and did my thesis on teenage labor force participation, believe it or not. And of course, the United States is the only country in the world where we don't do this. If you look at labor force participation in our OECD peers in Europe and Japan, they all have much more robust workforce development and internship programs through their early years. And we've got to create that pipeline coming in to the workforce, and we're hard at work in Chattanooga doing that. And I'll say AI has a huge part to play with this. Build Within has a great AI tool that will both help with the process of managing the internship, and of course, we have a whole internship track on teaching AI prompting, prompt engineering rather, which is a hugely important skill and will be more and more important.
Yeah, this is huge. Imagine high schoolers spending half their day in a classroom and then half their day at the office coding, learning everything about AI. This is already happening in Chattanooga, and they're going to ratchet it up quite a bit as one of these centers of innovation with foundation and government money. So then those high schoolers are going to grow up. So Mayor, I want to ask you, you're a visionary guy. What do you see for Chattanooga in the next 5 or 10 years? What are you dreaming of?
Well, again, I think every American city is kind of up against this challenge, and something that Secretary Raimondo said over the way there, if any of you saw that, really hit home with me. The same thing's true at the local level, even more so probably than the federal level, which is the urgency for change and to innovate is very, very high, but the inertia with a lot of government employees is exactly the opposite. A lot of our employees are very afraid of AI. They're afraid it's going to take their jobs. And we're working on how we can reassure them that that's not the case, right? That it will just help them become more productive and more powerful. Personally, I believe AI really has the opportunity to restore faith in government, right? I mean, this is a time when democracy itself is under threat. If you think about what AI can do in terms of the interaction between local government, which is where most people interact with government, when they're trying to find out, when does my garbage get picked up? How do I apply for a permit? We're working to redesign our website with a chat bot so that, and point, LLMs in our entire city code so people can find out all the answers they need. So I hope in 10 years, Chattanooga is that place where we are an example of where this is really happening. I mean, this is all in process right now. And again, in 10 years, I would also hope. I mean, we're hard at work on quantum research. We have the largest loops of dark fiber because of our municipal internet outside mainland China, anywhere in the country. And we think that is a huge asset and then frankly, a national security asset. And so we hope that Chattanooga will become a center for quantum research as well.
You're a natural for local government.
Thank you.
And I know you weren't dreaming of it, but it is. I think people need to understand the leading role that cities do play in innovation. Yeah. Talk to us about that, why it's so important that you're a mayor in this context.
Well, again, one of the books that really inspired me to run for mayor came out in 2016. You probably know what else was going on in 2016, and I was fairly distressed about the situation at the national scale. And this book is called The New Localism by Bruce Katz and Jeremy Nowak, who's unfortunately passed away, but Katz is very much alive and well. And in the book, it's really about how cities have more power than they've ever had to change the trajectory of human society. 90% of the innovation, 90% of the GDP happens in cities. And in a way, you can think about, human society as a network of cities. It's sort of an inverted view of the traditional political pantheon when you think of it as federal, state, and local. I talk to other mayors from around the city and around the world, and our sustainability goals, our goals around AI, our goals around workforce development, that all happens in cities, right? Government is not an abstraction at the local level like it is at the state and federal level. So local government is hugely important, and I do think that needs to be better understood.
That's terrific. And a bit more about the intersection between what it means to be an effective local government and AI would be great, because you're set up for that. So talk to us about your vision along those lines.
Well, again, innovation is difficult. As I was telling Susan, one of her colleagues at Harvard is a fellow named Mitch Weiss, and one of the first, the first thing I had my cabinet read coming into office was a book he wrote called We the Possibility, which is about public entrepreneurship, which is kind of like fish riding a bicycle, as most people would think. But no, it is a thing. It's a hugely important thing. And again, I think AI, I have realized that my entire, what we call innovation, delivery, and performance practice really needs to pivot to AI, to think about all the ways that we can, inside city government and outside city government, accelerate the pace of change and innovation to make the city work better for everybody. Again, A, to restore faith in local government and democracy broadly, but B, to kind of lead the way for the outside world. Because although government doesn't take chances as often as it should, it can, right? Like, I'm not going to go out of business if I take a chance and fail. I could get voted out if it's too big a mistake. But the toughest thing as a mayor is to make sure your employees understand that that as long as they're experimenting in the public interest, I'm fine with it. And I am. But the bias is very much in the other direction. And that has to change.
You've got some challenges in Chattanooga. It's not Oz, although I'm trying to depict it as Oz.
It's not Oz.
It's not Oz.
No.
So talk to us about the connection between technology, this fabulous network, and the way life is experienced in Chattanooga.
Well, again, coming into office, having been the chairman of our community foundation, I was disturbed because, again, a lot of what we had been doing, which is par for the course in government, is sweeping the difficult topics under the rug, particularly at local government. And very frankly, again, the disparities in a city like Chattanooga, and the legacy of structural racism, of redlining, is really very much still with us. And so we are working hard on educational reform and working hard on ways in which we have a nonprofit there, God bless them, called the Enterprise Center, that's focused solely on digital equity. And I'm really excited about how AI can really help close gaps. Secretary Raimondo was talking about how in Japan they're teaching older folks AI to bring them back into the labor force. I think, we can teach people who've been deprived of a great education prompt engineering in order to make them more productive, right? So I'm very much interested in ways that we can use technology and AI to close those gaps. And that's what the Enterprise Center is doing right now. So, they do tons of classes on all forms of digital literacy. Here's another great one. Again, Chattanooga is also a great city for public-private partnership. During the pandemic, we actually came together as a city and found a way to provide 1 gig fiber to every kid on free and reduced lunch in the entire metro footprint, the EPB's footprint. And even still, we only had an 80% uptake rate because there's still 20% of people who don't trust government at all and thought that there was some kind of something hidden in it. But I think the next closest city to us is Chicago at maybe 25%. So we are very, very hard at work finding ways to use technology to close those gaps.
What about living there for, let's say, a young tech worker showing up? Are they going to be able to afford to rent an apartment, buy a house? What's that like in Chattanooga?
Well, again, that's probably the one thing that changed during the pandemic. I came into office, I ran a campaign during the pandemic, which was bizarre, but of course I didn't have anything to compare it to. So, but it used to be that housing affordability was one of our great strengths. And suddenly people began to discover Chattanooga. Coming into office, I had EPB, our fiber and electric utility, send out a survey and ask, new subscribers where they had come from more than 50 miles away. And there were about 10,000 respondents, which hasn't shown up in our census data yet. That's a huge bump. And 400 of them answered a survey. And sure enough, they were from all over the country, had come there for the fiber, but also for the beauty. You can hike or, go caving or hang gliding or all these wonderful things in Chattanooga. And so that clearly, increased demand for housing. And so I then had to shift gears very quickly, hire a chief housing officer and put together a whole comprehensive plan, including a $33 million set aside for an affordable housing trust fund to make sure that we can keep up. And we're getting there. So we're not as bad off as a lot of our southeastern peers where it's just spiked, but we're getting in front of the train.
Something exciting that people may not know about Chattanooga is that the private sector, local government, philanthropy, and colleges, everybody works together. They call it the Chattanooga Way. And at first I thought they were kidding, but it's real. It exists. And what lessons have you learned growing up in Chattanooga and experiencing the Chattanooga Way that the rest of America needs to hear about?
Well, I did used to think it was just kind of jingoism, honestly. And then I became mayor and talked to other mayors and like, no, that doesn't happen. Yeah, it happens some places. But it's about, at the end of the day, I know this sounds kind of hokey, but it's about community, right? It's also candidly the product, I think, of the fact that we don't have a large mover that everybody sort of sits back and says, okay, well, they're going to handle it. We're not a state government capital. We don't have a big R1 university. And so to a great extent, necessity is the mother of invention, and people have and that has kind of formed the substrate of our culture. People have to work together to solve our problems. If we don't do it for ourselves, nobody's going to do it for us. And it is very much the sort of city where anybody will have a cup of coffee with you, including me. And it's a very real thing.
Real thing. And speaking of vision, the Chattanooga Airport just recently hugely expanded. So they're expecting you. Talk to us about the importance of that.
Well, again, it's not Oz, right? So it is very much a southern city, and we got sleep at the switch a little bit when I came into office. My predecessor was not a business guy, great guy, but not a business guy. And the airport had kind of lost the plot and had forgotten that air service development is economic development. They had been focused on a big private jet FBO to pay the bills, and it did that. But yes, we've doubled the number of gates. I'm working very, very hard on more directs to Chattanooga, and because that is a hugely important part of economic development. But we're getting there.
That's terrific. It's a great vision. So here you're in Washington. You're paying a lot of calls on people. What's the message you want to make sure people hear so we land on that at the end of this session? What are you trying to tell us?
Well, again, Chattanooga, because it does have a slightly funny name and it is a mid-sized city, it's like Steve Case says, get out there and see it. It's a very real place with very real possibilities. I guess I would just say in a very Chamber of Commerce way, we're open for business. We are looking for partners, both academic, government and private sector, to really leverage our fiber network, particularly leverage the quantum aspect. And so, if you want to have a conversation, we are open to it.
Absolutely right. Landing in Chattanooga always cheered me up. I always met interesting people there. I spent a ton of time. I wrote a book about this fiber network. That's why I'm sitting up here. And it is a special place, while not Oz. And you grew up there and you returned there. Are you glad you did that?
Absolutely. No, I went to Columbia. I kind of can't believe I got the letter in the mail. I remember back in the late 80s, and I thought they'd sent this to the wrong address, but, took it, went, great. Glad I spent that time in the city, went back to run a family business. At the time, thought, oh my God, what have I done, in 1990. But since that time, Chattanooga really, it's been an incredible journey. And I say all the time, Chattanooga, like everybody needs big, hairy, goals. And Chattanooga has the potential all things considered, to be the best city in the country. And that is my BHAG, and that's what I tell people there all the time. And my job is, a lot of people say it reminds me of Austin 20 years ago, and my job is to keep it Austin 20 years ago. So that's the trick, right? And so I'm hard at work on that every day.
Well, I'm glad you returned to Chattanooga, and thank you so much for coming to Washington.
Thank
Mayor
you, Susan.
Kelly.
Thank you.